I wanted to talk about the subject of law and grace. Um, it seems to be really, it's like sometimes there's not, it seems like not a lot of Christians actually understand it themselves. So let's clarify it for, might be a new Christian, might be an old Christian, been around the block a bit, but sometimes the subject it seems to get quite shaded over. Paul spoke on it and wrote books about it a lot because I think the same subject is same issue crops up pretty much all the time. Right from Genesis, when Adam and Eve were in the garden and had a relationship with God, and then they blew it by choosing the law over their relationship. The law being the choice of um, choosing the knowledge of good and evil, and then later the children of Israel were led out to worship God and be with him, and when he spoke to them they chose again. They said, don't let him talk to us, but you go up the mountain, Moses, and whatever he tells us to do we'll do. Again, choosing rules over relationship. So rules over relationship, or law over relationship again. So Adam and Eve, the children of Israel, and it's a theme that God's tried to show man, that we try to come to him through rules. Oh, we'll be good enough if we do this and do that, do that. But rules are no substitute for a relationship um, at all, and they can't get you there. They never can. So we're always trying to earn our way, and that's where the whole works versus grace comes into the Bible. Working for your salvation. There are passages where um, Satan tries to tempt man and says, you will be like God. And says, so he reached for the apple. So we have this try to be like God by your own works again, reaching for it with your own strength. And so Adam tried to be like God by reaching for it, but the actual truth of the matter is Adam was created in the image of God. He was actually trying to reach for something that God already had made him. He'd already made him in the image of God, and so he didn't have to try to reach for it by works to try and be like God or to try and please God. He already was made in the image of God. He already had the relationship. And there were some subtle lies that were introduced at that point. Um, other other lies that came into play in the Garden of Eden were um, Satan's basically saying, "You're God's holding back the best from you," and he said that by implying, saying, "Has God said you can't eat any of the fruit in the garden?" Um, and clearly, God had said you can eat all the fruit. And Eve replied, "You know, God said we can eat all the fruit except that one." And so the devil basically was trying to say, well, he's just keeping the best. What's the point of eating all the other fruit if you can't eat that one? That one's the best one. That's the one he's withholding the best from you. And so trying to put a wedge and a mistrust basically between God and man. And it's basically how he always works, isn't it? That's how it's always been done. If you start not trusting God's goodness, you start not trusting that God has the best for you, and trusting the relationship you have with Him, then you start doubting His provision and doubting who He is and His character, and that's when you're actually at the edge of sin, or at the edge of falling. and deception. So that is the wedge. And then he gets us into performing. Then it's performance-based Christianity, or works-based Christianity. It's either doing bad things in the good of knowledge of good and evil, or doing good things in the knowledge of good and evil. Either way, we're trapped in this cycle of works and law judgment. But the reality of it is, God brought the children of Israel out of Egypt by grace. He led them out by the blood sacrifice of a lamb, and that meal sustained them till they made it to the mountain to worship. Then he had fellowship with them, communicated, talked to them, and they chose again rules, not knowing the goodness of God, not knowing, trusting in his character and who he was for them. And they fell into, we want rules again, give us rules, not relationship. And unfortunately, they chose the rules and found that you can never fulfill the rules to get a relationship. And it's just not how a relationship works. It's not defined on rules. So Jesus comes and he dies on a symbolic tree to represent the knowledge of good and evil. And he dies on a symbolic symbol of a cross, which represents the laws. The law, vertical, the laws between man and God, and horizontal, the laws between man and man, which was what the law was divided into. So he dies on that symbol to restore back again to relationship. Now that is the simplicity of the cross. That is the simplicity and the good news. The good news is your relationship isn't based on your performance. Your relationship isn't based on a bunch of rules. Your relationship, in fact, is based on it being restored by Christ. Him fulfilling the rules, the obligations, and the will of God is to have a relationship with you and to be in your, to be with you, to walk with you, to talk with you. So the restored relationship through the cross is what it's about. So churches, I think, sometimes major on the minors. They go into, they worry so much about people's sin issues. They worry about tithing. So they're worried about all these things that aren't really heart issues. Because the only way the law works really is when the Holy Spirit inscribes it, not on stone tablets, but actually in your heart. And he says, I'll write it on tablets of flesh, not stone. And that love is the fulfillment of the law. So really, by only receiving the love of Christ, we will walk in and fulfill the law through love. And that's really the only way we can do it. And that is by the Holy Spirit living in our hearts. So otherwise we're living by rules again. We're backing away from relationship, backing away from grace, backing away from what Christ did at the cross to restore relationship. And so I just think, make sure you're not getting sucked in back into rules-based versus grace-based, or relationship versus rules or law. That's something that Paul wrote strongly against, because the true restored reality of relationship is evident. You actually have a relationship. That's the actual restored relationship part. So if that's not happening, then there's something wrong. When you've Christ died for you and you've got a restored relationship, you should have actual relationship. That is actually what Christianity is about. That's why we can say Islam is not right and all these other religions aren't right. Because they can only point to your sin and tell you you're a sinner, you've broken this law, you've broken that law. But Christianity is about a restored relationship with God, which means there should be a reality of a relationship with God. What should we have? What is expecting in a relationship? Communication. You should expect communication to occur in a relationship with God that's been restored. You should expect interaction of some kind. Now, he's supernatural, so it wouldn't surprise me that there wouldn't be supernatural things happening in your life. It should be interactive. A lot of people call it experiential Christianity, experiencing Christianity. Um, I think any of them terms will basically all point to the same thing. Intimacy with God seems to be the same wording, same thing, but just worded differently. The truth of the matter is, when you've actually had a real relationship with God and you've actually got one, it doesn't matter about people's doctrinal arguments with you anymore. Think about it if you had a heater and it was on. A heater was on and it was really, really hot. Now, people could argue to the blue in the face about what happens if you touch the heater. They could argue fors and against, da 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 da. But the truth is, if you touch the heater and burn your hand, that experience will tell you instantly what the truth is. And no amount of convincing or talking by other people could ever change your mind about that experience you've had. So Christianity is the same. You can have people talking doctrine, talking this, talking that, but a restored relationship with God is an experience. And once you've had that experience, no amount of arguing can ever take away the truth of that experience. And that is what a lot of religions try to do. They try to debate with you, or Christianity isn't true. To be honest, I've had so many experiences with God, it's ridiculous. So I've had the experiences. There's no argument in the world that people could have to try and say God isn't real. There's none. They're silly. They just haven't touched the heater yet. They haven't touched it. They're arguing about it being even the heater even existing. I touched the heater, found it was hot. Same thing. Christianity had an experience with God, restored relationship with God through the cross of Jesus Christ by his works, and voila, there's the real thing on the other side. Wow, fancy that. And so I find out that this Christianity is the real deal. So all these other religions, mate, they don't know what they're talking about. They're arguing for nothing. They've got no reality. But we have a reality-based religion. Experiential Christianity. Experiential. Real reality relationship. The real thing. And the good news is, it's not about your performance. It's about his performance. It's about Jesus' performance, who has come before us and done it so we could have that relationship. That's pretty good news.